This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
This chapter looks at some aspects of information technology, how it's changing, and the newer types of technology which are becoming available. And the first definition, I suppose, to look at is the Fourth Industrial Revolution, as it's called. So the first Industrial Revolution is the one we tend to talk about. This is the one which I suppose began happening roughly in the 1800s, where in particular steam power became available as opposed to just horsepower. And steam power allowed a huge amount of mechanization to take place. It was particularly in the cotton industries for weaving and the steel industries and so on. And this is where really people's wealth really began to move up very, very sharply, because once you had powerful machines that would enable you to make, let's say, textiles very, very quickly, then they became much more affordable. The second industrial revolution is, I would put early 1900s. Think of Henry Ford in production lines, mass production of cars and the like. This was tending to make more use of electricity to power machines rather than steam and so on there. And you got these vast assembly lines there. You tended to break down the task of making a car into many, many little tiny components. So you have people standing in a row, each doing a very repetitive job, and this increased the efficiency really of producing goods. It maybe wasn't giving people a very pleasant work environment, but certainly produced goods efficiently. So that was the 1920s. Then really beginning 1960s, but really coming into its own 1990s, 1980s, we had computers and automation here. Process automation, digital machinery, automation particularly in the finance business. Spreadsheets were really invented in the 1980s, early 1980s was about the first spreadsheet and so on. And it began coming into, computerized machinery, digitally operated machinery, and the like. And this, again, was another step forward, really, in how quickly, efficiently, flexibly, and reliably products could be made. But for all of these here, we're pretty much dealing with products, with manufacturing. A little bit of service information coming in here. But the fourth industrial revolution here, we're looking at what are called digital assets. The importance of having information and working with it, of using that information to maybe develop new products and services that people want, analyzing that information to understand what's happening in the marketplace, and so we can make right decisions in the future. Within this, there's still going to be some production. We have robotics and 3D manufacturing or additive manufacturing, which we talked about in a previous chapter. We have autonomous vehicles, which again we mentioned. But here's one, biotechnology. So the fourth industrial revolution allows the sequencing of genes to be done very, very rapidly. It will allow pharmaceutical companies using this information to design better drugs. It will enable doctors maybe to use specific drugs to target particular types of cancer and so on. And basically this biotechnology is based in technology, but basically it's information about people's makeups what diseases they might be susceptible to, what drugs may work best for them. So this is very much here dealing with digital assets. It's very much dealing with the richness and importance of information in both production and in designing new products, and understanding what's happened and at planning for the future. Now here's a complete list that the World Economic Forum has suggested. There are going to be key technologies. Again, some of these we've mentioned. We're not going to mention particularly again here. Artificial intelligence, endowing machines with the ability to make judgment almost, as it does in playing certain games. Endowing machines with the ability to learn from past patterns or past mistakes. Autonomous vehicles. We're kind of promised that the Uber taxis are going to arrive without a taxi driver. They may do. So lorries might be driven essentially without having a lorry driver there. And within factories and warehouses, these machines are already moving around very safely. Big data I'll look at later, as it suggests here. So will the cloud. Process automation. Process automation is, for example, allowing a machine or having a machine which can drill different sized holes in different places on a piece of metal and so on. And everything is kind of coordinated. A bit of metal spins around, it drills a hole, and then it will change the size of the drill bit and drill another hole and so on, all without human intervention. It's faster, it's cheaper ultimately, it's very reliable because the machine isn't going to get tired, is not going to make mistakes. Custom manufacturing, we've mentioned this 3D printing or additive manufacturing. This is where we can add layer upon layer really to something, and then maybe you could begin to add layers like that, and then you begin to add a kind of layer like that at the top. You have essentially kind of produced a donut shape without having to drill anything out. You actually construct by adding on bits of metal or plastic. Very good for, as I said, prototypes. Will this work? What's it going to look like? Very good for almost on an emergency basis, making special parts. It's beginning to be used in surgery. They will, X-ray or scan your jaw. Let's say you have to have a new jaw for some reason, some disease. They will scan it. They will make a new jaw precisely like the shape of the old one, and it will fit exactly. The Internet of Things and connected devices. Again, we've mentioned this. This is where you could have an inventory, something which detects the weight of raw material, and when the weight gets too little, it will order more. It will keep track of goods as they go around the factory. It will know precisely where each item is, because these will have little identifiers within them, and so the bits, if you like, the production is connected to production planning. We have robots and drones, self-explanatory. Social media, we've mentioned blockchain, worth a bit of a mention here. Blockchain is it's a kind of cryptographic technique. I think all we need to know with blockchain are probably kind of two things. First of all, it's indelible. Think of blocks of information being added to a blockchain. This could be who owns a particular building, what planning consent has been given to amend the building, and so on. So here's information about when the building was first built. Here's information about the first owner. Here's information about the second owner. Here's information about a planning consent. Here's information about when the extension of the building was approved and so on here. Here's information about the third owner. So the building, as it goes through life, it if you like, it accumulates a history. And when this is recorded in this technology known as a blockchain, it is indelible. It cannot be changed. Which is great for something like a property registry, because one of the dangers of a property registry is that if the property registry is a definitive piece of evidence about who owns this building, if someone was corrupt, they could change the ownership of that in some way and try and conceal it. Blockchain prevents that. It is indelible. It can be used for currency. So this was currency when you get into something like Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency. It can, for example, be keeping a record of who owns the Bitcoin at each stage of his life. It can say, well, this person paid it to that person. And that's recorded in a way for all time, that payment has been made. Secondly, about blockchains, they are distributed. So rather than this information being held in one computer, which of course is then vulnerable to damage or hacking, this information is held in thousands of computers independently and in a kind of loose network, if you like. And it means that information is much safer. It effectively can't be lost. Data visualization with more and more data available. The problem is we can't make sense of it. So data visualization is the art form almost of creating graphs and charts and diagrams which communicate the data properly to us. The data visualization of graph could be static, it could be movable. You've probably come across graphs, if you like, where it has some sort of little kind of slider at the bottom, and as you kind of slide backwards and forwards here, the information kind of changes. So it could be something simple on the weather. So here we have sunshine, rainfall, wind, etc., etc. And as you move the slider maybe through a month, you get these going up and down, sunny days, rainy days, etc., like this. And it can be much more memorable, much more informative than simply looking at tables of figures. And then mobile technology, we've talked about this. Everything's connected to everything all the time through smartphones, through iPads and tablets and so on and the like. Wi-Fi, of course, enables us to be in constant touch almost anywhere we are. 4G, 5G mobile telephone transmission allows you to be in touch with an awful lot of data, even if you don't have a Wi-Fi connection. The nature of information. Well, we just need to know that data is raw fact. So I could have data which shows the height of everybody living in the city I live in. So there's about, let's say, 1 million people live in the city. It could show everyone's height. That could be extremely accurate, but it's almost of no information, no use to me. It's not very informative. Data really becomes useful when it's changed into information, and information is really data with meaning. And typically the way you get meaning out of it is you summarize it. You present it in a report, you present it in a graph in some way. So for the heights of people, I could say, right, what is the average height of males? What's the average height of females? What's the average height of people who are 12 or below in age? What's the average height of people who are 60 and above? And so on. Does the height of people change with the different areas of the city they live in? So people living in affluent areas, are they on average a bit taller than people living in poor areas and so on? Now it's beginning to speak to us, now it's beginning to be informative. Similarly, in a business context, we don't just want to know a list of sales transactions, we want to see them grouped really by customer, by product, by country, maybe by time of day in which the sales were made, because that in a supermarket may vary and may affect how we stock our shelves and so on. So some sort of processing has to take place usually on raw data before it becomes informative, and this is where we can really use it. And then we have knowledge. Knowledge and knowledge management is a slightly newer concept. You could have information sitting in a filing cabinet over here, all these summaries, all these beautiful graphs, but if nobody looked at it, it's not going to do any good. Really, information becomes particularly useful if it's in someone's mind, or perhaps increasingly nowadays in the mind of a computer which uses artificial intelligence. The real challenge here is how do we make sure that we have all the knowledge available. And the two types of knowledge, first of all, there is explicit knowledge. So explicit knowledge is knowledge we know we have. It's usually written down or recorded in some way. And once it's recorded, let's say in a database or a spreadsheet or even a Word document, you can search for it, you can find it. It's safe, it's captured, safe, it can be shared. So we would know last month's sales. They was going to be recorded in some sort of management accounting report. People can discuss last month's sales compared to the sales before that, and use this knowledge they have to draw conclusions about what products are doing well, what aren't going as good as they should be. That's explicit knowledge. However, the tricky one is what's called tacit knowledge, which is not formally recorded. So take a sales representative. A sales representative will know what last month's sales were for each of the major customers. But the sales representative might also know that one of the customers is kind of thinking of maybe going to a competitor. Now this idea of this customer thinking of moving to a competitor, there's no particular formal way, certainly not within the accounting system, of recording that. And that sales rep might just kind of keep that up here, say, I must look after this person, I must be extra vigilant this month, extra caring this month, to try to keep them on board. But that's not shared anywhere else. Or this sales representative might know that in 3 months' time, this customer is probably going to place a big order, but I'll keep quiet about that because it might be raising hopes. And anyway, it'll make me look really good when this order comes in. The trouble is, if it's not formally recorded, it can't be shared. So the use of this valuable knowledge is restricted. And secondly, if the sales rep were to go, then of course all of this valuable tacit knowledge goes with that person and is lost to the firm. Similarly, when you're providing products, most of what happens with a product is explicit. You have a diagram, you have a product specification, you know how to make it. This is all explicit information. When you're providing a service, you know what makes a restaurant particularly good. And okay, the recipes and so on could be explicit, but also what you want is a way of making people feel welcome, of trying to create an atmosphere in the restaurant which people feel relaxing. Now that's going to be extremely hard to record. This is kind of almost automatic skills that people have within the restaurant. That's tacit information, tacit knowledge, but we have to try and capture it. We have to try to define what increases the hospitality, if you like, within a hotel or a restaurant, so that we can exploit that. The qualities of good information. Here we'll be looking for information which is sufficiently accurate, We don't want it to be accurate necessarily to the last cent. And it's going to depend very much on how far up the organization you are. So if you're at the top of the organization, you might be dealing in millions. If you're at the bottom, you're probably dealing in cents, because you're doing the debits and credits. It has to be complete. It has to be cost beneficial. We're not after information for the sake of it. We want information only if it's going to help us improve our efficiency, improve our profit. And I'll take you back here in this cost beneficial bit here. If you remember when we were talking about project appraisal, with costs and benefits. We're not doing a project for its own sake to get something shiny and new. It has to be justified by the benefits. Similarly with information. And the finance department can play really a large part here in maybe trying to work out certain measures really as to how useful the information is and whether it's actually worth producing this report every month if hardly anyone reads it. User targeted and relevant really. User targeted, is it useful for the person getting the information? Is it relevant to increasing our profit, increasing our efficiency? Emails, for example, that we get are often not user targeted. People, often send emails to everybody, just kind of copy everybody into that. And you get these emails popping up in your inbox. You think, why have I got that? I have to read it to find out if it's relevant, and you spend time finding out if it's relevant, then you wonder, is it relevant? It's not relevant. Of course, it's wasted time. It has to be authoritative. In other words, we have to be confident that it's right. So beware anything you read on the internet is what I would say. Even something like Wikipedia, you have to have an element of skepticism to make sure that it is not promoting a particular person or company in some sort of biased way. It has to be timely. We have to get information quickly enough to be able to use it to make decisions which are going to improve things. There is no point in getting information 3 months too late. And of course, IT and processing have vastly shortened the time taken by and large to get information. It used to be, you'd be recording stuff manually. It would take a couple of weeks to produce a report. Then the board meeting would come 2 weeks later, and you're always looking at something that happened like 4 weeks ago. Now what companies have, they will have daily reports of sales, because the IT system is capable of producing this very, very quickly, and they will be able to react much more speedily and much more effectively to changes in the marketplace or other changes. It has to be relatively easy to use. So it has to be properly described. We have to be able to work the menu system to go down and look at different depths of information and so on. The graphs have to make sense to us and so on. Otherwise, information is not going to be informative. As you go up the organization, you tend to have different kind of requirements here. Top management tends to be looking very much at outside information, very much at future information. Of course, they will look at, how did we do last month? But a lot of top management's function is to look at the strategy of the organization. What should we be doing in 5 years? And for a lot of that, they have to look at, what's developing in the marketplace, what's developing in technology, what do I think is going to be popular in the future, what's maybe going to be the exchange rate in 5 years' time, and so on. They're doing this longer range planning. So a lot of it is estimates, and a lot of it is relatively inaccurate. It's going to be rounded to millions. And it's going to be what I would call ad hoc. In other words, it's very often relatively non-routine. Management is always thinking, what can I do, what do I have to react to, and so on. At the bottom, it's quite different. Operational staff, the people come back to this idea they're doing the debits and credits. It's almost entirely inside. They are recording transactions which have taken place. It's very often historical. It's not an estimate, it is precise. And it's often very routine. So when we're looking at, accounting in the digital age, we have to have an accounting system which can really deal with this vast range of different requirements for information, which allow people at different levels to get information that they require to do their jobs.